Figure until 8:15. Normally it wouldn't take this long. We're going to be going through the 15 or so most common objections that you're going to be faced with when you're dealing with a seller. Now you will see here as I go through this that there's typically not one response that you need to be able to, there's not one particular response that you need to feel compelled to be able to deliver. There's a couple of different strategies that you might be able to use. So it's a matter of which one you might choose to. Now typically you're going to want to use more than one. But okay, so you're meeting with a seller, or you're meeting with a for sale by owner seller, or you're talking to a for sale by owner seller on the phone, and you're trying to angle for a listing appointment, and the seller, you've got a good rapport going with them, and the seller says to you, I think I might try to sell it first on my own. I might try to sell it first on my own. So they lay that out for you. Or they say, I made a decision, you sound great, and when I'm ready to talk to a realtor, I'll bring you on in. But right now, I'm inclined to try to sell it on my own. So that's the objection. Now listen to me. Very, very important. Get into the habit of always questioning an objection first. Always. Even if you think you know the answer to it, always question the objection. And you question the objection by merely asking why. Okay? So always do that whenever you get an objection. So the seller says to you, and that's one of the questions on the test, right here. Okay, what do you do first when a seller raises an objection? You always question. Now, why do you think you want to question? Because you want to open up the discussion to find out why they're inclined to do it. Maybe it's the commission. Maybe they feel they can sell and market the home, the property better than you can. There could be a variety of different reasons. Until you isolate the objection, you cannot very effectively deal with it. So always isolate the objection by always questioning it first. So you're going to ask why, okay? That helps you breathe, that helps you, get some perspective, okay? Now, when they go ahead and they give you the reason why they want to go ahead and do it on their own, one great strategy is to breed discontent. Breed discontent. And what breeding discontent really means is just bring up to their attention a number of things that maybe they didn't consider, that they maybe didn't think about. One of them is that, how frequently are you prepared to show your property? Now, most sellers say what? What do you think most sellers say? As often as I have to. Okay, which means that they're not showing their property every day. Most sellers say, well, I'll be open to showing it a couple nights a week and maybe one day on the weekend. When you hear that, what you want to say is, what about the other days of the week? What about the other 3 days during the week and the other day on the weekend? Oftentimes buyers don't operate on the same schedule that you operate on. And then come back and deliver your value proposition, and that is that you'll make sure that their property is available to be seen 7 days a week. So one, you're breeding discontent, and then you're delivering a remedy to that. Okay? Another question you could ask, and I think we all know this, anybody who's got experience around the room, when a buyer comes in, a prospect comes into a for sale by owner seller, the seller never gets any feedback. They never get feedback. Do you think the seller, the for sale by owner seller, ever says to the buyer, hey, tell me, can you see yourself living in this property? Never. They just show the property, and the buyer shows interest, and then leaves. And then the seller never hears from the buyer again, and they wonder why. Bring that up. Bring that to their attention. One thing you can say to that seller is, whenever a buyer is brought to your property by me, I will ensure that I get feedback to you, so we know what buyers are thinking. Furthermore, we are going to put your property in the MLS, so there'll be other agents drawn in to show your property, from Coldwell Banker, from Century 21, etc. I will make sure that I reach out to that Coldwell Banker agent and not only get her feedback, but also her buyer's feedback. And what you got to do with that is put that in the dashboard, because as you know, the sellers have their own dashboard now, and they can find that information themselves, okay? So that's an important thing. For sale by owner sellers never get feedback, and as a result, they're left in a void. Another way to build discontent, okay? Also, have they considered unqualified buyers stopping by? You know, when I show your property, or typically whenever a professional realtor shows your property, they'll make sure that that buyer is mortgage approved. Otherwise, you have people coming into your house and you have no idea whether they're financially able. Breeding discontent. Another thing that I would bring up is the safety and security issue.
Oh, definitely.
Someone knocks on your door. Who do you know?
I know he really wants to buy your house.
Right. How do you know they're not an axe murderer? How do you know? What about your children? Don't you have any concern about that? Whenever I bring a buyer to your property, I'll have the buyer's telephone number, their home address, I'll have their email address, and if we do get them mortgage approved, we'll even have access to the Social Security number so that we know who these people are when they come to your property. Okay? Something that I like to say is, you know, buyers today, they are so savvy. When they see a for sale by owner seller, what do they know? They know that that seller is not paying a 4, 5, 6% commission. So what buyers do today, Mr. Seller, is they see the for sale by owner, they're so savvy, they run comps on the value of your property, and then they discount that by between 4 and 6%. So what's the net gain to you, Mr. Seller? What's the net gain to you when buyers go ahead and do that? Let me say that again to make sure you get this. This is a very salient point, very important point. Buyers are so savvy today, Mr. Seller, that when they see a for sale by owner seller, they know right off the bat that they're not paying a 4, 5, or 6% commission. So what these buyers do is they evaluate what the worth of your property is by running comps, and then they arrive at that value, and then they discount that by an additional 4 to 6% because they know that you don't have a realtor. So what are you gaining out of this? You're just putting in a lot of work and effort, and there's no net financial gain to you. That's a compelling argument to a for sale by owner seller. And you know, beyond that, it's true. When you go to a for sale by owner property, you know they're not paying a commission, so you always lowball it. Always. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay.
Would it be appropriate to mention the fact that statistics prove that only about 3 or 4% of
Absolutely. Say it, Billy. Say it. Say it.
No, I was just asking if it isn't appropriate at that point to mention that only about 3 or 4% of properties are actually sold by sale by owner.
Beautifully said. Billy comes to all my classes religiously. Remember the statistic, okay? Remember the statistic. 96% of all the properties sold in Brooklyn in 2010 were co-broked. 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 96%. Meaning that 96% of all the properties were in the MLS. Here's another number for you. 3% were exclusives. And only 1% of all the properties sold in Brooklyn were sold by for sale by owner sellers on their own. That's a dramatic stat. Only 1% was sold by the for sale by owner. I love to say to sellers, and I put it, and you know, if you have this kind of dialogue with them, I love to say to sellers, you have every realtor in Brooklyn working against you. And that's the truth. For sale by owners don't look at it that way, but that is the truth. Okay? All right. I don't particularly like this, and I wouldn't quote it, but I have it down here anyway. Look at the last bullet point here under the first heading. There's a statistic that the National Association of Realtors uses all the time. As a matter of fact, RE/MAX was using it for some time on their television ads, and that is that typically when a seller lists their property with a for sale by owner, when a for sale by owner lists their property with a realtor, the realtor can get somewhere between 15 and 17% higher commissions. I mean, I don't like that because if a for sale by owner seller has the wrong price in mind, and overprice their property, then that number gets very inflated. So be careful with that, but with the other ones, you want to, the most important thing to remember here with the first one, breed discontent, because there are things that the seller doesn't consider and doesn't think about when they try to list and market their property on their own. Okay? Yes? All right, number two. You know, I would list my property with you less, but your commission prices me out of the market. Again, the first thing you want to do is to question the objection and to say, how do you know? How do you know? And effectively, the best response to this question right here is to use what we just used a moment ago. That, you know, you believe that my commission would price your property out of the market. Have you considered the fact that buyers are so savvy today that when they see a for sale by owner like yourself, that they will arrive at the real market value by running comparables, just like I would do if I was going to list your property. And then once they run those comparables, then they lower that number that they're prepared to make an offer on based upon a perceived commission of somewhere between 4 and 6%. So for you to say, Mr. Seller, that you think that your commission, that my commission is going to price you out of the market, you know, it doesn't make any sense. Okay? That's the answer there, when you get that specific objection. Okay, we good with that? It's really sort of redundant to the one we just talked about. Okay? My attorney told me not to sign anything. Now this is typically when you're in the seller's property. It's happened to me many, many times where the buyer is mandated by their attorney, who's typically a family member, or a arm's length friend who's an attorney. Typically, the seller may say, look, I like what you had to say, Les, but my seller told me not to sign anything. Okay? Now, there's a couple strategies here. First, what do you think the first strategy is? I mean, it's right in front of you, but to ask a question. Who's your attorney? Because maybe one of the Reinhardts knows the attorney. You can pick up the phone and try to call one of the Reinhardts right away. That's one remedy. The second remedy is this, and listen to me carefully. Listen to me carefully. You can say, do you like what I have had to say tonight about myself and what Fillmore can deliver? Now, typically the seller will say yes, but again, my attorney told me not to sign anything. You can say this, and listen to me carefully. Why don't we go ahead and complete the listing agreement and just make a handwritten note with an asterisk saying that this document, this listing agreement, is subject to your attorney's approval. This document is worth nothing, Mrs. Cohen, without your attorney reviewing it. But this way, we can move the process along and get your property on the market quicker if we can just move it along and get this signed instead of me having to come back. Now, doesn't that make sense? Now, a great test close question is this. A great test close question. When you pose a logical argument to a seller or to a buyer, when you pose a logical argument, a great test close question is, doesn't that make sense? Now, what I just described right here.
Excuse me, there's a beige Continental blocking me? Beige? Beige Continental?
Beige Continental? Tan Continental? Anybody
Tan,
else?
white.
Tan Continental. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, here we go. All right, so everybody good with that? It's a great thing to say. The other thing you can mention is that Fillmore's listing agreement is standard. It's boilerplate to virtually every other listing agreement from any other realty organization in Brooklyn. So there's nothing hidden here. There's nothing crazy. But I like the one of getting the seller to authorize everything, but make it subject to their attorney's approval. And then I got your question. Hang on. And then what I would do is this. What do you think I would do? What do you think you should do after the seller goes ahead and executes the listing agreement and you initial the fact and they initial the fact that it's subject to? What do you think would be a smart thing for you to do? Fax it right over the attorney, or bring it over the attorney tomorrow morning. Say, the service I'm going to provide for you, Mr. Seller, is, since we have this, you can keep a copy. I'm going to bring a copy over to your attorney's office tomorrow morning. Now, here's the thing. Seller's remorse, buyer's remorse is real. Once people make a commitment like that, even that's a pseudo-commitment, they have remorse. So the quicker you pull it together and get it over to the attorney and move the process along, the quicker, if you're working with a buyer in a totally unrelated circumstance, if you're working with a buyer and you've got an offer to purchase out, you've got to consolidate the time, because the quicker you put that deal to bed, the quicker you wrap it, the higher the probability that it's going to stay in place. Okay? So you have it signed. Don't leave it to them to get it over to the attorney. Either fax it over or bring it over if it's not too far away. Okay? Question?
Yeah, all right. So now you have an agreement with an asterisk saying subject to the attorney's approval. And you're going to fax it to the attorney and have him...
Right, and my preference is bring it over to the attorney, introduce yourself to the attorney, be professional, but go ahead.
And have him sign that document,
Yeah.
or
Well,
put an addendum on
No,
it?
he doesn't sign it. The attorneys don't sign
No, I
it.
mean signs that he approves it, or
Yeah,
initials it?
I would just have his initials there. I would hand
On
him a
that
great
document.
question. Great
Okay.
question. The question was, how do you know that the attorney's approval is there? What you're going to do is you're going to draw a little line. After you physically write out, this listing agreement is subject to seller's attorney's approval. Okay? You put one little line with your initials indated, one little line, their initials indated, and another little line with their attorney's name, which you're going to get from your seller, because obviously it's to their approval, where the seller will go ahead and initial it. Okay? Then you have all three in place. Yes?
When I bring contracts over to the attorneys, I usually run right into the receptionist. So if you're bringing this listing agreement over,
Right.
you probably won't get them.
You may not, but at least it's there physically, and let the receptionist know this is very, very important. Mr. Weinstein is the attorney's name. Mr. Weinstein's client asked me to bring this over. It's always, you're just going to drop it off. This is Mr. Weinstein's client, so this is very important and needs his immediate attention. You can ask for a receipt. It's a good idea. Ask for a receipt. Very good idea. Excellent idea. Yeah, where to go? Where to go? Now, I would call back Weinstein to make sure that he received it. But close the loop off, and these are great ideas to close the loop off. Excellent points. Question?
May I suggest, Les, that if these things could be bullet pointed rather than like a narrative, if you list them on the hearing as bullet points.
You want me to do that?
So when you're preparing when you're preparing it in the first instance.
Okay. I'll take that.
It's just a suggestion.
Okay, I appreciate your suggestion. I'm not going to do it. But what else? Yes.
I was going to say, I know some attorneys that it could really sit around there for a while till you get it back.
That's right, and that is one of the problems with attorneys and accountants. They don't have any urgency. Now, what's the only way, just as an aside, what's the only way to create urgency with an attorney?
Don't go somewhere else, they're in a home.
Right, but say what's the answer?
Don't go to another attorney, they need to say yes, they.
Okay, let me ask the question again. Someone give me the answer. Wait a second. What's the only way to create urgency with a seller's attorney or with a buyer's attorney?
Don't leave their
Have the buyer, have the seller call up and whip the attorney. Who's paying the attorney? You're not. The buyer or seller is. Have your buyer call up the attorney and say, look, I'm really unhappy with how slow you're treating this issue. This is very important to me. I mean, it may be on the bottom of your pile right now, Mr. Weinstein. Put it on the top of your pile. It's the only way. You cannot create urgency with the buyer's attorney or with the seller's attorney. Only the buyer or seller can. That's the only way to do it. Why? Because they're paying them. They're paying them, okay? And I would have no problem in calling up my buyer, let's say. Let's say I have a buyer and the offer, the agreement is laying on the seller's desk. I would have no problem with telling my buyer that, or telling the seller's realtor that my buyer is absolutely getting angry, and they start looking at other properties. A quick way to create some urgency. Okay? Any other questions on this? Let's move on. Okay? You know, I've already been on the MLS, listed with other realtors, and my property has been listed by other realtors and I've had no success. Why am I going to have success with you? Okay, now make sure you understand the objection. The seller is considering going for sale by owner. Maybe it's an expired. This is a great scenario for an expired seller. The seller says, look, I've already had my property listed with realtors on the MLS, and there's been no success. You know, I've been successful. What are you going to do differently? Now remember something. You, here at Fillmore, have 5 very, very clear differentiators. You have 5 differentiators, okay? 5 differentiators. 5. And if you don't have these down now, you better get them down and memorize them, because these are the things that separate Fillmore from the other realtors out there. So now, let's get back in sync here, because your answer to this seller, who says this to you, this expired seller, or this for sale by owner seller, is going to be for you to elaborate on those 5 differentiators, okay? So here I am with the seller. The seller says, look, I've had no success. This is my property with another realtor on the MLS. You know, what are you going to do for me? Can I ask you, can I see your home brochure? Now, most organizations don't have the beautiful, multicolor, trifold home brochures that Fillmore has. Most don't. Most don't. So I'm going to ask the seller, can I see their home brochure? And you know what they typically say? What are you talking about? And you're going to say, well, that's one of the reasons, perhaps, why your property didn't sell. Let me ask you this question. Do you have a list of the 20 or so web distribution partners that your former realtor leveraged to get your home maximum exposure? You're going to go, what? At Fillmore, we have in excess of 20 web distribution partners. When I list your property, it's going to appear on these 20 other different websites. And, you know, frankly, 86% of all buyers today use the internet, so we are there for getting our seller's property into the eyes and into the eyeballs, on the eyeballs of these sellers. Can I see that list? Let me ask you this. Do you remember when a professional photographer came over to your property to help create your web page on Century 21's website? Do you remember the professional photographer? No. Well, that's something that Fillmore does. We have professional photographers that come over. Let me ask you this. Do you have a copy of the home warranty that Century 21 agent took out on your property?
What's that?
What are you talking about? Okay. Now, frankly, for those of you, how many of you in this room, and it's okay, because that's why we're here, how many of you know how important the home warranty policy is when you go on a listing appointment? Okay, at least there's a handful who do. It's a topic for another night, but there is a home warranty policy that's available to everybody in this room. And if I were you, I would use it every time that I go out on a listing appointment. Here's the way it rolls. You will pay for this home warranty policy. You, out of your own pocket. You're going to pay for it. However, here's the silver lining. There's not a penny that comes out of your pocket until that property closes, and it comes out of the proceeds, the distributions that you would get, that Fillmore would get commission-wise, and ultimately it's going to come out of your pocket. So if you're getting a $5,500 commission yourself, this policy will cost anywhere between $399 and $699, depending upon the size of the property. So effectively, you're not paying for it until you get paid. Now, my daddy always used to tell me that you got to spend money to make money less, and is the truth in this business. Okay, but it's one of those things that gives comfort to the seller while his or her property is being listed and sold. If the refrigerator breaks, if the hot water heater goes, if the heating element in the property goes bad, if the stove goes bad, those things always happen when the seller's property is on the market, and they wonder about those things. Those things are covered. They're covered. And every time one of these incidents happen, yes, a service person comes over to the property, and the seller's got to pay $60, $70, as they would anyway if the toilet overflows. I mean, right? Or if the oven breaks. But then, if the oven needs to be repaired or replaced, there's no money, no cost. Okay? Now there could be 10 events. It could be 10 events of these type that happens over the 6 months when the property is listed. It could happen 10 times. If the property doesn't sell, you pay nothing. If the property doesn't sell in 6 months, it expires, you don't pay a thing. Not a thing. And you probably wonder, how could that be? Well, let me ask you a question. When people take out insurance policies, some people don't get sick? Well, that's how insurance companies make money. They make it on the game of numbers. Question?
One question I had about that, if you extend the listing, you have to, it stays with it.
It's evergreen, it stays with it. Now here's the other part of it. Here's the other very good part of it. Once you do sell that property after 5 months, this warranty policy maps over to the buyer for 1 full year at no additional cost other than what you pay at the settlement. It's a great tool to market that seller's property, both in your property description online, as well as they have a nice banner that comes right off the lawn sign that says this property is home warranty. So, Mr. Seller, besides from you having peace of mind of being covered, we can also attract more buyers with the program. So it's a double-edged sword, okay? You don't pay a penny until the home closes. Now, some agents, and I'll tell you what, this is a well-kept secret, because the best listing agents in this company use this all the time. They use it all the time. A little secret, but they use it all the time. So I'm sharing it with you. There's no cost out of pocket. And what you say to the seller is, just like that professional photographer, I am going to hire a professional photographer to shoot videotape, digital stills, and to create a floor plan for your property. I personally am going to hire a professional photographer. Now someone tell me why that's not a lie. It's coming out of your commission anyway, because Fillmore's taking half of it, right? So you are hiring a professional photographer. So you're not lying. And I'm going to buy you a warranty policy. So it's you. I'm going to buy you the warranty policy. I'm going to hire the professional photographer. Okay? All right, and maybe it can even help you with the commission. Okay? So effectively, what you're doing is you're just reverberating the 5 Fillmore differentiators. Okay? That's effectively what you're doing. Okay? All right. I don't want to tie myself down on one realtor. Okay? Now, these are sellers who typically want to do what? They want to have what kind of listing? An open listing, okay? There are sellers who just want an open listing. And for those of you who are new, an open listing is when the seller elects to sign a listing agreement with a variety of different realtors. And they also elect at the same time to sell the property on their own. Okay? Now, sellers think in their own weak way that, the more people that they have, quote unquote, working for them, the higher the probability that the property is going to sell. Oh, but what don't they realize? They're on the bottom of the pile. That seller is on the bottom of the pile. If a realtor doesn't have a commitment from a seller, that realtor is not going to put energy and money and time behind getting it sold. There's no merit at all. The seller's thinking is off. You've got to get very, very comfortable in explaining this to the seller. Now, if you explain that to the seller, and the seller says, well, I understand that point, but I still want to be able to sell my property on my own, what do you think you can suggest to the seller?
Any buyers prior to us listing, we could work in.
Okay, that's a great point. Now check this out. There's 2 things, absolutely. There's 2 strategies. Write these down for your own benefit. If the seller is locked on wanting to sell it on their own, offer them an alternative. Because oftentimes sellers say, well, there were some buyers who who had come in, who I think is still serious, who was still out there. What you can say is, I appreciate that. Let's do this. Let's go ahead and write up the listing agreement to list with Fillmore, and we'll put in some exclusions. Exclusions. And all exclusions are the names of these other buyers who the seller believes may still be out in the marketplace, interested in their property. Now here's the key thing with exclusions. Limit the number of them and limit the time. When you write in exclusions, make sure you limit it to 4 or 5 buyers and you limit it to 45 days or 30 days. Okay? So try to limit it. So they're called exclusions. So we're going to write in the listing agreement, we're going to write in these 5 buyers' names, and if any of them move into contract with you, within 45 days, you'll owe me no commission. Now the probability, the reality is that these buyers haven't pulled the trigger, they're not going to. Okay? Now that's one alternative. The other alternative is to suggest to the seller that you go with exclusive agency. Exclusive agency means that they can go ahead and sell the property on their own, and you will be the person who interfaces with any and all other realtors and or buyers that may be interested in their property. Okay? So if a realtor is interested in their property, now the key here is this. Here's the key. Don't let them put their own for sale by owner sign on the property. You want to have a Fillmore sign on the property. Allow them to go ahead and try to find buyers on their own, through Craigslist or, those little tear sheets that they have in church or temple, wherever they might be, okay? But make sure that you have your lawn sign. So, effectively, you're limiting the number of viable buyers, of those people who just know the seller was as a for sale by owner at some point in time, or find them on Craigslist, what have you. Any realtor that inquires about the property, that's yours. Any buyers that you bring to the property, they're yours. Okay? That's exclusive agency.
But that can't be done with an MLS then, right?
Yes, definitely.
You could do exclusive agency with
Yes,
MLS?
yes,
Oh.
yes. That's why it's viable, and it satisfies them because they think they can sell it on their own. Now, here's my experience with this. That they love the notion of being able to market on their own, but as soon as you start bringing in buyers and realtors start coming in, they fade back to trying to market it on their own. Those ads that they were putting in the paper, they don't do it anymore. And ultimately, it's going to be your exclusive effectively, even though it's not an exclusive agency.
I'm a little confused. The exclusive agency doesn't mean those 4 or 5 people they put in, right? They can-
No, that's the sign.
You got your sign there, what if someone's knocking on the door with the sign?
If they knock on the door, and you're not the procuring cause, then it's their deal.
Wow.
It's their deal. But it's the Fillmore sign, so hopefully, well, let me ask you this. If it's the Fillmore sign, how many people knock on the door?
Right.
They
A lot.
call up.
Right.
No, they don't. They call up. They call up. But if they don't get an answer, then they knock. Okay? Let's get that straight. It's a great point. Here's the deal. You've worked out an exclusive agency with the seller, meaning that the seller can go ahead and market the property on their own, but the property is listed with you in the MLS and there's a Fillmore sign out in front. Yes? We good with that?
Yes.
If someone just wanders up to the door and knocks on the door, even if they saw the Fillmore sign and didn't realize that the call, your name is hanging there, that's not your deal. It's their deal. Correct? Yes? Okay.
I normally, if I have an exclusive agency, I work out with the seller ahead of time that X percentage, if they sell it on their own, comes back to Fillmore to pay for advertising.
Very nicely said, okay? Great point, Debbie. What a lot of aggressive agents do is this. They say, here's what we're going to do. They explain the process, and they say, now if you go ahead and you do sell the property on their own, I'm going to be out of pocket quite a bit of expenses. Now, you're not going to be, but you're going to say that. And I would hope that we can write into this exclusive agency agreement that you will pay me 1% for my out-of-pocket costs and troubles. So you can negotiate that if you want to get a little piece. Everybody following me on that? But it's up to you to go ahead and do this. Yes?
If you're doing an exclusive agency, why would you want to put the sign out on the lawn? Wouldn't that just alert?
No, because 96% of all the properties in Brooklyn are Cove Road.
Yeah, but the brokers are actually going on the MLS and seeing it on there.
Right.
They're
But
not driving by
I
it.
also want any nosy neighbors or anybody who's coming by to call me as opposed to having their lawn sign on the door, knocking on their door. Right? Think through this. I mean, think through it carefully. The last thing that you want to do, if you've signed an exclusive agency agreement with the seller, the last thing you want is their sign on their lawn or in their windows. You don't want that. As a matter of fact, that would be a deal killer for me. You want to have your sign.
Well, what if you say, you know, I'll give you an exclusive agency, but you can't put any sign on?
I want my sign. They can't. That's the whole idea. That's the whole idea. No signs from you, only the Fillmore sign. Everybody with me?
What if they don't want any
If they don't
sign?
want your sign, right.
If they don't want any sign,
Right.
then you're going to point out one great fact. Write this down, everybody. Write it down. The latest statistics from the National Association of Realtors is that 30% of all buyers today, even though we're in the age of the internet, do ultimately find a property from signage. Now, 86% of all realtors use the internet, but they don't, not 86% buy what they see on the internet. All 30% of the time. And you know, companies, I do work for Coldwell Banker and for Weichert over in New Jersey. The number over there is 40%. 40% of all their sales come from a direct result of lawn signs. So when a seller says, I don't want any signs, what's the first thing that you say when a seller says, I don't want any signs? But what's the first thing you say?
30% of the...
Why? Why? Come on, you failed the test already. It's why. You always want to ask why to get inside their heads, okay? The seller says, I don't want any signs on my property at all. You know, why would you want to? Why?
I don't want the neighbors to know.
Well, your neighbors are gonna see a steady stream of people inside your house anyway. So what? They're gonna think that your wife's having an affair with all these people knocking out the door. Why would you want to do that? Okay? You know, the notion that they don't want to let people know is silly. Why? Because their property is going to be an open house. Their property is going to be an open house 24/7. Why?
They need exposure, more exposure.
Exactly. Exposure sells properties. But effectively, when you list a seller's property, they're going to have an open house 24/7. How? The internet. The internet. The internet. 24/7. Their property is going to be exposed to millions and millions of people. Okay? That argument you should blow away. Okay? All right. All right. Wow. All right. Here we go. Page 2. Top of page 2. Okay? You know, Les, this all sounds great, but why can't we do this without a formal agreement? You know, I really don't like the idea of signing something. You know, why a formal agreement? Okay? Mention the fact, find out why. Always ask why up front. Always, please. If you walk away with one thing tonight, whenever you get an objection, always begin your dialogue by asking why. Okay? They'll tell you, well, I still like to be tied down. And you're going to point out that, you know, in this industry, in the real estate industry, having a formal agreement protects you and protects me. It protects both of us. Okay? It's a great thing to say. Just like an attorney, just like a doctor has expectations, I'm a professional too. I have expectations. And you know, realtors that don't have expectations, I don't think that you'd want to deal with because they're not professional. Okay? And another fallback position, and any of these answers are acceptable, you know, there's no way that I am going to be able to list your property without a formal agreement because my manager wouldn't allow it. You know, we've got a marketing machine that's going to be behind getting your property marketed and sold. And we just need to have a formal commitment on your part. Okay? Any of those answers work, okay? Okay, next point. Wow. Wow, these comps are low. You presented your comps. And the seller says, wow, these are low. you know, my neighbor got X, and my house is so much better than theirs. First question you ask is, how long ago? How long ago? Because we all know one thing. What's happened to pricing in this marketplace?
Down.
Okay? So you want to get that perspective. Number one, ask them how long, and if it was 3, 6, 9, 12 months ago, point out the fact that this market has continued to deteriorate here in Brooklyn. You know, I'm sad to say, but it's continued to deteriorate. Next question I would ask is, how do you know your neighbor got that number that you quoted a moment ago? How do you know?
They showed it in black and white.
He showed you in black and white. If he showed you in black and white, then what should you have?
Comps.
You should have comps. You should have comps to validate it. They showed you in black and white. If the seller just told me that's what they got, it's very easy. You should have the comps. But every person who sells their property likes to brag to their neighbors about how much they got. How much they got, and they exaggerate. And now that they're out of the neighborhood, where's the validation? Unless that seller, who you're dealing with right now, who said that my neighbor got X amount more, unless that particular seller that you're dealing with saw the transcripts, went on to PropertyShark.com, okay, or Geodata.com, or went down to the town hall and got the number, then it's baseless. It's baseless. And most importantly, that's a comp that you should have anyway to validate it. Right?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All right. Look, the seller says, Les, I really like what you said, and I'd like to go ahead and list my property with you, but you know what? I've invested some money already in ads that are running Sunday and the following Sunday as well.
Okay, I'll pay them for you.
What's the first question you want to ask? How much? How much money have you gone out of pocket? Always question objections, whether they're coming from a buyer or a seller. Always. And let me just give you a reason why. Always question objections because it gives you time to think about what you're going to say next. And when you ask a question, who's in control? When they ask a question, they're in control. So get into the habit as a salesperson to asking a lot of questions, especially when you're faced with an objection. Okay? Here's the strategy. And you know, one of the top listing agents in this company, and by the way, all of these responses, I should have said this from the beginning, I apologize. All of these responses came as a result of having a workshop with the top listing agents in this company. And these are all their ideas, not mine. I contributed some, but the top listing agents of the company, we were in a workshop, and I solicited these responses, okay? One of the top listing agents says, immediately after finding out how much, he says, you know what? I will pay for those ads. As soon as your property sells, I'll pay the $400 that you put cash out of pocket. Now, he's not saying I'm going to give you $400 now.
Right.
He's saying as soon as your property sells,
He wants to make them feel comfortable.
as soon as it sells, I'll be more than happy to compensate you, and if you want, with interest. That's what he says. I'll give it a big smile. Now that shows confidence. Another thing that you can say, if that fails, I would go with that one first. If that fails, you can say, well, so you've got ads running this Sunday and a week from this Sunday. And just stay close on top of that seller. Show up at the open house. Show up at the open house to show interest, and be in contact with them so that you can, you know, pull the trigger quickly to get in there and to get that listing agreement signed. Question?
I'm just thinking after that second Sunday, you can go to him, he says, I got 5 names from those 2 showings. You say, put them down as exclusions if you get them, let's sign.
It's a great idea. Everybody hear that?
Yep.
Great idea. Great strategy to use. The strategy that was just suggested was, and we're piggybacking on an idea that some of you just learned a few minutes ago. If you go there 2 weeks henceforth, you show up at the open house, and the seller says, you know, there are a couple people who have come in over the past week or two that I think may be real buyers. What you can say is, why don't we do this? Why don't we write up the listing agreement and give me those buyers' names, and if they go ahead and move into formal agreement within the next 45 days, we'll treat them as exclusions. Just what we talked about a few minutes ago.
Right.
Everybody with me on that?
Yeah.
All we did was we parlayed an idea from another objection to this one. Great point, yes.
I had a case where, for sale by owners, we were bringing people over to the house.
Right.
2-3 times a day sometimes.
Yep.
And the second day, we started bringing people over. They wanted to know if we had a listing agreement in the park.
Really?
And we signed them up,
you got a
and we signed them up, but they had their ad in the paper.
Okay.
And they wanted us something, I don't know, which they were here now.
Yeah, yeah, nice.
They preferred all the phone calls.
Really?
Yes.
The for sale by owner did? Excellent, excellent. Now remember one thing, one of the things that I would strongly urge you to do, whenever you're dealing with a for sale by owner seller, and something that I didn't really cover before, just bear this in mind. When you're selling yourself to a for sale by owner seller, one of the things that you want to portray yourself as being is an expert negotiator. Because that's important, because most sellers aren't in the negotiation business. Now if you come, which I believe you will, to one of the Fillmore Pro Certification classes, which is on just negotiation, you can tout the fact that I've taken courses on negotiating skills. And you can be rest assured, Mr. Seller, that with that skill set that I have, that I'm going to help you get the highest and best price possible. Yes?
Yes.
Okay? Listen to those words. And you know, as your mom and dads told you when you were young, it's not so much what you say, it's how you say it. I just want to let you know, Mr. Seller, that I have taken formal negotiation classes, negotiation skill classes. And what that means to you is that you should have the comfort level that I'm going to be able to get you the highest and best price possible for your property. The highest and best price possible. Not over what the property is valued at, but the highest and best price possible. Okay? We good? Yes?
Les, I have a comment to make on that 45 days that you're going to give them.
Yes.
I wouldn't give them 45 seconds.
Okay.
45 minutes. 45 days is too long. 10 days, because now you're talking about a month and a half where you're negotiating, you're bringing buyers,
Listen,
and your deal's going to get killed.
very good, Josie. Josie, you can, what I strongly urge you to do is you want to, just like when you want to limit the number of exclusions, you also want to limit the time. But the key word here, Josie, the key word here is to, you have 45 days to get these buyers into contract. Now,
Can't happen.
right? I mean, because if these buyers are not mortgage approved, there's no way that they're going to be into formal contract, executed contract with mortgage
If you give them
approved.
45 days, they might.
I mean, there's a possibility. So my point is,
Percentage is very small.
frankly, Josie brings up a great point. Try to limit the time as low as you can get, and then negotiate up if you need to. It's a great point. Great point, Josie.
Yeah.
Try to limit it. Always try to limit it. Yes, we good?
Yes.
All right, here we go. Let's move on here. I have friends in real estate. You know, the question is, whenever a seller says that, or a for sale by owner sells that, you know, if I'm physically there at the listing appointment, and the seller says that, I would sit back with a big smile on my face. Now, don't say this with a scowl on your face. Say it with a smile on your face. Say, you know, if you have friends in real estate, can I ask why I'm here?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, but you got to do that with a smile on your face. Be an actor, be an actress. You can't do it like, why am I here? There's a big difference between going, why am I here? Or, you know, can I ask, why am I here? Okay. Right? So,
Evidently your friend is not a great real estate broker.
okay. All right, now listen. After you get past that, and maybe get them to laugh a little bit, here's something that's very, very true in life. And I bet probably 25–30% of you have had experiences in business dealings with friends and family. How does it always turn out? It always sucks. Always. It's always bad. It's always bad. It's always bad. So just rationalize with these folks and say, you know, not only have I heard horror stories about people listing their property with friends and with family, but I've had some personal experience of my own. You know, there's a point in time where sometimes a seller or a buyer has to, you know, bang their fist on the table with that agent who's representing them. Now, how's that going to be sitting over Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner or holiday parties when that person is your cousin. So you have to help people see and realize what the downsides are. Business, and if you can just remember, business and pleasure, business and family, they don't mix, okay? And we know that. So just rationalize it and bring it to their attention, okay? You know, you set up the listing appointment. Hopefully you confirmed with the sellers that both title owners or all the title owners are going to be there. Because remember, a listing agreement without the people who are on the title, if one person is missing, the document's worth nothing. Okay? So you always want to confirm ahead of time that all the title owners are going to be present. Now, if you get there, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you're not. Here's something that's very, very important. I strongly recommend this. That you go ahead, so you arrive there, and the husband's there, but the wife is working late. Go ahead and make the presentation and get him or her on your side. And then, and you're going to find out ahead of time, you know, when do you think your wife will be coming home, okay? Now, if she's coming home, you know, in an hour or so, and an hour from when you get finished going through the listing agreement, say, you know, I got an appointment and some phone calls to make. Why don't I come back in an hour? You've got to strike while the iron is hot. Don't wait till tomorrow or the next day.
You saying you do that after you told them?
I would make my presentation to her, and then you know, watching the clock. You know, let's say I'm with him, and she's working. You know, he says she should be home any minute, but she's not. So I'm going to go through the formal presentation, and then say, why don't I do this? I've got some phone calls to make. Why don't I go out and make the phone calls, and I'll come back in a half hour. All right? So get her or him, who's ever there, on your side. Get them on your side. Get them on your side. Likewise, in a divorce situation, you get to the listing table, and there's the husband, but the wife's not there. I hope there's been cases, and I think some of the experienced agents have had the same issue. You're there with the husband, and the wife has no idea that you're there, and vice versa, because he plans on splitting, but she doesn't know yet. You know, but she doesn't know. Or okay, this kind of stuff happens. It happens. One thing you always have to do: you make the presentation to him, and you get his buy-in. And he says, but obviously, you know, my wife has to be involved. Don't allow him to call the wife and to say, I found a realtor that I want to run with. Because what's her reaction going to be? Okay? After I make the presentation to him, I've got to ask his permission to talk to his wife and make the same presentation to her. Okay? You've got to do it that way. It's the only way to do it. Otherwise, you're going to get slammed. The door's going to shut on you. Okay? Question?
Do you tell her when you do the presentation that you already met with him, or?
Yeah. Well, what's going to happen is you will get his agreement, and then ask him to call her to let her know that you'll be calling her to make a formal presentation to her. Okay? So close the loop. For you to call her, especially if she doesn't know that she's getting divorced, that would be inappropriate at the very least. Okay? But get him to call her, and then you call her and make the same presentation and give her all the due consideration and professionalism. Okay? All right, here we go. So I will not sign anything. We did that one. Okay? But last one on page 2. You know, I really like what Coldwell Banker has to say. This is very important. Whenever, this is a great tip to give you, and this is going to be a quick one, whenever you find out at the listing table, which you should always find out, and we're going to go over this in the listing presentation class, you should always find out who your competition is while you're on your listing appointment, before you make your presentation. Okay? This is before you make your presentation. Right after the house tour. Right after the house tour, you sit down and you ask a couple of questions, and that's for another class, another night. But one of the 3 questions that you ask is, you know, share with me, Mr. and Mrs. Cole, have you met with or do you plan on meeting with any other realtors? Have you met with, or do you plan on meeting with any other realtors? When they say yes, you want to do what? Say who? Always ask the questions, okay? Can I ask who? Can I ask who? And she says, well, we met with Coldwell Banker, and we're meeting with RE/MAX tomorrow. Probe a little bit and say, can I ask what offices? And she'll mention, this location and that location. Always be positive. Never disparage the competition. Never talk negatively. So you know what? I know a number of the agents from both those offices. And Coldwell Banker and Century 21, they're, RE/MAX, whatever it might be, they're great agencies. As a matter of fact, they sell a lot of Fillmore's listings. Okay? Because, and the seller will look at you a little bit strange, and you'll say, one thing about Fillmore that you should know, Mr. Seller, is that when we market and expose your property, we not only market your property to buyers, but we also market it to other realtors. Why? Because we know that 96% of all properties in Brooklyn are sold in the MLS and co-broke. It's a great thing to say. It's a great thing to say. Yeah, Coldwell Banker is a great agency. As a matter of fact, they sell a lot of the properties that Fillmore lists. Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, you may not realize this, but 96% of all the properties in Brooklyn are co-broke. And we market not only to buyers, but also to realtors, and frankly, we're happy to share our commission. Oh, I love that! Most realtors come across as being greedy bastards, don't they? Say, we're happy to share our commission. Happy, even though you're not. Say it, okay? All right.
Excuse me, it's also a good time at that point to let people know that those other real estates are
franchises.
Franchises.
Yeah, you can
Throw
bring
that
that
in.
out. You definitely bring that out. Franchises.
Yeah.
Okay, and they, franchises have, have their idiosyncrasies. Bring it out in a positive way. Okay. Top of page 3. Let's go. Other brokers, you know what? So what's your commission? And by the way, never, ever, ever. We got about another 10 minutes. Never, ever, 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 ever get into a discussion about commissions over the phone or early on in the presentation. Over the phone is so easy to deal with. The seller asks, so before you come over, what commission do you charge? Say, well, I'll be honest with you. I'm a professional realtor, and one thing that I would never do, I would never talk about pricing, market value, or commissions until I had the opportunity to physically walk through and preview your property. They don't know what to say. Okay? It's a great response. Now, if you're there and they want to talk about commissions, say, we've got a lot of ground to cover. Pricing and commissions are two very important elements. I appreciate if we just hold them off for a little while until we really get a look at what the value of your property is and what Fillmore has to offer, it would be appreciated. Okay? And typically they'll wait. Now, when you get to that topic, and remember, and you'll see this when we go through the listing presentation class, any discussion about pricing or commissions is at the tail end of the appointment. Why? If you bring up pricing or commissions early on and it's not their satisfaction, they close off. They're not even listening. They're not even listening. Okay? Because it's the most important thing that they want to know, but you're in control if you do it right. Okay? Now, so you present the comps, you come up with a relative market value of the property, and the commission issue comes up, and you state 6%. And they go, whoa, 6%? You're nuts. And Asia was in here 3%, 4%, 3, 4%, 5% max. Here's the argument, and I've alluded to the argument twice tonight already, 3 times tonight. What percentage of all the properties in Brooklyn are co-broke? 96%. That means there's almost always another realtor on the other side of the equation. Here's what you want to point out, and it's a great thing to do, and everyone in this room could do it tonight with just this little piece of knowledge if you're not doing it already. Say, you know what, let's just change hats for a second, Mr. Seller. You're the realtor, okay? You're the realtor, and you've got a buyer who's a very motivated buyer, and you run a property search for them, and you come up with 10 properties. that fits that buyer's requirements. I hate to say it, but what realtors' eyes do first when a property is pulled up, it goes right to the commission. And that's honest. Be honest. Okay? So now you're being honest. So, if you, Mr. Seller, you're the realtor, and there's 10 properties that you can show your buyer. If 8 of those properties had a 3% co-broke to you, meaning they were listed at 6%, and one was listed at 5. One with the co-broke, the listing commission was 5%. That's 2.5%. And one was 4%, which is 2% to you. So there's 8 of them that you could go ahead and your company could earn 3%. There's one that your company would earn 2.5%, and one where your company would earn 2%, and you would get 50% of that typically. Which ones would you show first? Which ones would you avoid showing? Effectively, what you're doing when you lower your listing agent's commission is you're hurting yourself. Because there are buyers, there are realtors that will work against you. It's a very viable argument, but put it in their backyard. Say if you were the realtor. Okay? It's a great argument. It works. I found it worked every time. Worked every time. Okay? And the role play is right there for you, so you can change the numbers around. Okay? You know, if and sometimes sellers will say, you know, if you're so good, when my property was on the market with Century 21, if you're so good, you know, why did you sell it? Why did you sell it? Okay. Okay. You can ask, and it's right there. You're right, John. You know what? You know, can I probe? Ask when it was on the market. Ask who the realtor was. Ask what the commission was. Ask what the pricing was. Okay. Get them involved in this dialogue, because if these pieces are not in play and they're not the right answers, then you got them right where you want them. Okay? Because if it was a lower price commission, say, you know, quite frankly, like many other agents, you know, we went ahead and we focused on properties with our buyers that were priced appropriately with the marketplace, or maybe when the commission was more like what was typically offered in the market at that point in time. Okay? Next one is a simple one. You know, Les, I love you to death. I think you're a great salesperson, but whatever. We really like you. We like what you have to say. But I think we're going to go ahead and do it on our own. A great thing to say is, well, you know, thank you. I know you genuinely mean that. And with that being the case, let me prove to you that I can deliver everything that I promised. At least try. Okay? Last point here, we want to wait till the market strengthens. Last one, then we're out of town, guys. We want to wait till the market strengthens. Okay? Let me say this. I follow this stuff very closely. There is not one expert, not one prognosticator that looks at 2011 or even into 2012 for this market to strengthen price-wise. Okay? Now, you all know that there's some pockets in Brooklyn where the market is strong. Why? Why is that? Demand! 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 For a hot area in Brooklyn, there's a demand. And when there's a high demand, prices stabilize and or they go up. But by and large, in Brooklyn, not. Okay? So point that out. Point out that number one. There's not one person, not one expert who looks for pricing over the next year to grow, to strengthen. What else is happening in the marketplace right now? Mortgage rates are going up. They're going up. Now, they're still at historically low levels. However, they've been creeping up. And what that means to you, Mr. Seller, is that more buyers can't afford your property. Their buying power has diminished. And your property has become out of their reach if you wait. Now is the time to get your property on the market. Furthermore, there's a group of economists who believe that we're going to have another round of foreclosures and defaults in Brooklyn. And if that is the case, if that happens, we're going to see more inventory coming on the market at a lower price, which will further deteriorate the market value of your property. Let's get your property on the market now. Don't wait. Okay, so it's three good arguments for why you should get the property on the market now. All right? You learned something tonight? Yeah. Good night. Now listen, where's that sign-in sheet? Who's got that sign-in sheet? Right there.